What up? This is Sterling here, bringing you our first installment in our setup series where we break down strategies of how teams set up on different maps. Today we're going to be covering Truth, and we're going to be covering the base spawn trap setup, which I like to call T for short, and covering the car spawn trap setup, which I like to call U for short, the letter U and the letter T. Get more clarity on that. So, to get things started, let's talk about the base spawn trap. So we're going to use blue bases as an example here, and we're going to spawn trap them in red. So you're going to have one guy in the base, one guy in P2, a guy top mid, and a guy car. To give a little bit of description and responsibilities of each position. So the base guy, you're responsible for giving support fire to your team and blocking his base. Remember, you have your two nade resources here. This is going to be important because one of your responsibilities is to be careful of the split spawn here on the bubble. And how this can happen is you is the car player, and he's also responsible for making sure there's no split spawn there. This car player, he wants to be more so right here, so he can watch if anyone's rotating from bottom mid to car 1, see if anyone's pushing from the car door to the base. The further he goes down here, the higher the possibility of the split spawn occurring, increases the chance of that split spawn occurring, basically. So you want to be careful, and you can do it purposely, but be careful because if you're unaware, this player is just going to come from behind and just get the easy cleanup on you. And the car player is huge because usually it's really hard for the opposing team to push from red to P, especially when you have top mid and car, because they can get melted. So teams are going to be sending 2 or 3 players from the base to the car side, so be careful and just focus on staying alive. You can also utilize this car 2 position to mix things up, but again, mostly try to emphasize being on the bubble and shutting down any car door to car push. And you got your 2 resources here on the 2 frag grenades, and you have the 2 sets of plasmas in each bubble as well. We have the player top mid. You get the 2 plasmas and the P shooter that's top mid, which I currently have at the moment. And you have the player P2. You got your 2 resources here with the frag grenades. And you want to mostly be playing on this back wall here and make it really hard for these guys to push up to the P street. And remember, you have base support, the guy in your base behind you, and the guy top mid supporting you. So you don't need to try to overextend too much and get too weak and die. You can also utilize this position, but I wouldn't recommend it too much because you can get melted from the basement window or the attic. Same thing with P3. The same thing can pretty much happen to you, so be careful. That's why you kind of want to be more inside of the P2. Top mid is kind of the least important position in a setup because it's an inactive sector, meaning it doesn't influence spawns. It doesn't give your team spawns, or it doesn't block spawns. So one of your responsibilities being top mid is once, like if a car player or the P player were to die, you can always fill in and rotate and take their spot, so you're blocking the spawn and the opponents won't spawn there. And if the opponents decide to jump from like red base to top mid, that guy top mid is probably going to get melted from P, car, and the guy in the blue base. So it's kind of they're asking to get average if they do that for the most part. And another responsibility of the top mid player is also possibly collapsing into the opposing base when he sees the opportunity. Because that's going to be important, because with these setups that we're going to be going over, especially when it comes to Truth, you don't want to just stay in the same setup the whole time, because especially on Truth, you're going to be running out of ammo. There's no weapons that spawn on P or the base or car. So you want to be switching between the T setup and the U setup. Or an example would be like, say the guy top mid jumps into the red base, and then this guy here, blue, jumps top mid. We clear out red, and now we have them spawn trapped in blue because we left blue open. And we just flip it around. So we should still have the guy P, we should still have the guy car. So that's the T setup for you. The next setup is the car spawn trap, and it has a few variations. So one variation is where we're going to have one in the blue base, one in the red base, and we're going to have one on each street. You can either be high right here, or you can be more so low right here. And your responsibility is to watch the car 1 spawns, because they're going to be spawning car 1 or either bubble when they're in that car spawn trap. So you want to make sure no one from car 1 does like a thruster slide into the basement, because that can cause some trouble. And you're also going to relay information to your team if they're going to be pushing from like car 2 to blue, and also watch that car 2 to top mid. And then you also have that option to fall back over here to help your base player if they're like pushing the base hard. And this setup is really good, especially when camo's coming up, because either this player or the other player on the red street can just drop down and get the camo, and the other person the opposite person will take responsibility for the P, because that camo guy is probably going to move out. So that's one variation of the U setup. Another variation is when we have 2 players doubled up in either base. So say we have, for this one, we're going to have, for this example, we'll have 2 players in blue base. We'll have a player in P, rotating between each street, being P2 as well. And then we're going to have one by himself in the opposite base. So it can, be 2 red, 1 blue, and 1 P as well. You can flip-flop. So that's that variation of the setup. And before I talk about the final variation real quick, just to go over the responsibilities of the base player, remember to stay alive, and a few tips is don't get tunnel visioned on car 1 and car 2 too much, because remember, they could spawn bubble. So this person might just push up on you, and you're not going to be ready, and you'll be weak from the car 1 and car 2 player, and then you'll just get cleaned up. So be careful of that. And if you ever get too weak, you can always like drop down in the base or fall back to the Eli if you need to. And also be careful as well, like you don't want to just be chilling Eli here the whole time, because that can open up the spawns for them to spawn back base on you. Even though you're right here, it can still happen, so be careful of that. And so the last variation of the U setup is basically having 1 on the red base, 1 on blue base, 1 on P, and then we're going to have 1 player on either the red bubble or the blue bubble. So we're going to use blue bubble for this example. And when we're blocking this 1 bubble, that means they can only spawn car 1 or the opposite bubble. So a tip for this player is utilize the back button a lot, because say like 2 players are up, you don't want to just jump up and start shooting those players, because that's going to make them spawn car 1, which is not necessarily bad, but there's another split that can also happen. And it's up to this player, the bubble player, and also the P player to be aware of the split spawn, because the split spawn can occur on either the blue Eli or the red Eli if we're putting too much pressure on that car 1 and car bubble. So this usually happens when this P player is more so on like one of the ends here. So if he's on red street, that's opening up the blue street side of the spawn, on the blue Eli basically. Same thing, if he's on blue Eli, you're gonna open up a possible split spawn on the red Eli. So it's okay to be like on either street, but when someone's dead, make sure you're gonna be blocking both sides. And how you can do that is when you're in the middle, you're going to block both ends. This is a concept called the triple spawn point. I'm going to cover it more in depth in another video. But essentially is when you're in the middle of the triple spawn point, you're going to block all 3 of the areas they can spawn. Because in P, they can spawn on the Eli, P1, or the opposite Eli. So those are like the 3 spawns in the triple spawn point. Car is also a triple spawn point. As you can see, there's like each bubble and then the car 1. But we'll, like I said, break that more in depth in another video. But yeah, be aware of that split spawn, because that Eli guy can just sneak up on the base guy or sneak up on that P guy and then just ruin your whole setup. So be aware of that. But this bubble setup is one of, or if not, the most dominant setup on this map, because you have P control, so you're able to get camo access easy, and you have them trapped in really tight spaces, being in car 1 and the opposite bubble. So with these setups, again, like be able to shift from the T setup to the U setup or T to another T, because like I said, you're gonna run out of ammo on this map because there's no ammo in any of the bases, and once you run out of ammo, you're gonna be useless, and they're gonna probably break your setup very easily from there. So an example of how to like switch to a T setup, like let's go from the bubble spawn trap. So I'm gonna be here blue bubble. I have a teammate blue base, I have a teammate red base, and I have a teammate in P. So how we're gonna collapse is this blue player is gonna leave blue and push car with me. We're gonna take out the car one and opposite red bubble players. We're basically gonna open up that blue base, and once we clear this out, one of us can stay car, and the other one is gonna move top mid. We should still have that player red base, and we have the guy P, and now we have the T setup, and now we have them spawn trap in blue. So that's an example right there of how to shift from that U setup back into a T. And we can also shift from a T to a U. So say we have them in the blue spawn trap. I'm the bubble player. We got a guy top mid. We got the guy P, and we got the guy red. And what we can do is have this player right here, car, collapse in on blue. Have maybe the top mid guy jump in blue. We both go in. We take the blue base out. Now we're both blocking blue. We still have our player red. We still have our player P. Now we have that one variation of the U setup where we have 2 blue, 1 red, and 1 P, and they're going to be spawning car. So you can get creative on how you're going to be switching between the T setups and the U setups. One more thing I want to cover before ending this video is talking about the 2-man one of the variation of the U setup where we have like 2 in the base. So say we have 2 blue right now, we got 1 in red, and we got 1 in P. And they're spawning car, right? We have obviously in the car spawn trap. I want to go over 2 different rotations you can do when they're like flooding that base with only 1 player in it. And that base where there's only 1 player, that's called the weak side of the setup. And the base that you have 2 players in is the strong side of the setup, because you have like more players there, so it's harder for the opposing team to push in the blue base because you got more players over here. So it'd be easier conceptually for the opposing team to push red when you only have 1 player over there. Hopefully that makes sense. So say the opposing team, blue team, is sending 3 players into the red base. Okay, there's 2 things you can do when you're in the setup. One is do a reverse bump. So that means we have 2 players in this blue base, right? So what you're going to do is have 1 blue player bump over to the P, and then the person who's P is going to bump over to the red, and now we're going to shift the strong side of the setup to the red base now. So we're going to have 2 players red, 1 in P and 1 in blue. So we did like a reverse rotation to create a stronger, to match the numbers that are heading this way. Okay, does that make sense? So there's that. Another thing, another rotation you can do is basically doing a collapse. So the same example. So we have 2 players in blue, right? Someone's with me. We got 1 player in red. We got 1 player in blue, or in P, sorry. And they're doing the same thing. They're pushing 3 players over to red, and maybe they have their 1 player like either car 2 or maybe in our blue bubble. So what we can do, so the first thing that needs to happen is our person in the red base, when he feels like whether the P person might be relaying the information to him, or maybe he realizes it himself that, oh shit, they're pushing my base heavy. What this player can do is rotate back to the P, whether that's dropping down below the base or just rotating back, and hold this position as long as you can. But if you feel too much pressure, then fall back all the way to the P if you need to. But try to hold that red Eli as long as you can. And just hold those people pushing from car to red at bay as long as possible. So from here, these 2 players in blue are going to push together to car. So if they have the 1 car player, we're going to 2v1 him, take him out very quickly. And then after that, we're just going to keep pushing. And then now come from behind on the rest of the blue team. So we're going to take them out. And once we take them out, we can have the player who is red Eli rotate back into the red base, and now he can block it. And then we should still have our 2 players on car, and then one of them can stay, and then one of them can rotate top mid, and boom, we're back into the T setup. So we just did a reverse collapse on them. So you can either do that reverse rotation where we shift the strong side of the setup to the opposite base to make it harder for those players pushing from car into the base. And then we gave another example of how we can collapse on their ISO player, or another example is if we have 2 players here, 1 player red and 1 P, and what if they send 2 players to red? We can still do the same thing. We can push out together here and do a 2v2 with the 2 remaining players, take them out, and then flank behind and do the same thing. And if our player on red Eli ends up dying, then what we can do is just create a V, is what I like to call it for short, but that's essentially a T without a top mid person. So say our red Eli person dies, but we still have the P player alive, and we have 2 of us on car. After we clear out red, one of us can stay car, and then the other person push into the red and block it. So now we have me on red, 1 on car, and 1 on P. And then they should be spawning blue. And then once my teammate spawns, say he spawns behind me on red, maybe I can jump to top mid, take over top mid, and now we're back into the T setup. So that's it for the video, guys. I hope you guys learned at least one thing and enjoyed the video. Please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. We're going to be doing weekly releases, so look forward to that. As always, peace and love, brothers and sisters. And again, why limit yourself when you have the ability to transcend?